Welcome to Pivot Point, where we discuss business issues that are trending in the country. Last week, we started a discussion, and some of you at home sent us messages saying, can you please delve deeper into the issue of the currency situation? Zimbabwe has had inflation in the past years, but now it seems it has been contained. But is this enough for the economy? And joining me once again for this discussion is economic analyst Dr. Langton Mabanga. Welcome once again to our lovely show and discussion.
Thank you very much, and thank your listeners.
So last week we started a conversation and people wanted to know currency issues that filled up the inbox. There was the major inquiry. Are we doing enough as Zimbabwe? Is the central bank doing enough to address the currency situation? And how do we stimulate the use of the local currency?
In my view, I think that, look, one, inflation has tremendously gone down, and not only gone down, it has also stabilized to a good extent, to a great extent, really. But the fundamental question is, is this not owing to the containment of money circulation? If you and me today drove to Deep Gutu, to Deep Zaka at Ndanga Growth Point, would we see ZiG in circulation? If you and me went to Mzarabani, to Mshumbi Pools, would we get ZiG in circulation? If we went to Marange and Manikaland, would we get ZiG in circulation? If we went in Makakavula, in Beitbridge, if we went to Kezi in Matebeleland, would we get ZiG in circulation?
It's quite interesting you pose these questions, Doctor. When you mentioned Beitbridge, earlier on this year, I traveled to Beitbridge, and I discovered that within that region, we are now speaking to a rand economy.
Yeah.
And this is coming from across the borders. It's almost similar in other towns that are bordering other countries. How do we make those places stronger in terms of trading with the local currency, the ZiG? Because I feel where we are at right now, the key fundamentals have been addressed by the central bank, they have been addressed by government, but there needs to be more of a mindset change. Where does it start? Does it start with me as an individual? Does it start, where do we start these conversations?
I think it's a market issue, and the question is, how do we nationalize ZiG? How do we make ZiG much more inclusive? It's an inclusivity issue. I also do appreciate the tough job that the governor assist with.
Yes.
Because, mind you, there are legacy issues that he is dealing with. And I think this far he has done absolutely well. But going forward, I think that let's learn from other economies that have turned the corner, that have seen the economic miracle. I'm talking about the Asian tigers, the Singapore, the South Korea under General Parker, Singapore under Lee Kuan Yew, China under Deng Xiaoping. What did they do? I think we ought to take a sanctioned approach of investing in our own SMEs, in our own startups, in our own entrepreneurs. I think we ought to do that. We ought to grow the economy from within. Even linking our own people to our natural resources. Any other investor should come and invest upon that which is held by Zimbabweans. It's very, very important. That way, it's an implied mechanism of securitizing our minerals. So if you then have the RBZ say compelling, look at the profits being posted by banks in Zimbabwe.
They're very high.
They just, it's obscene.
I think banks have been the most profitable entities.
Absolutely.
During
In
this
such,
time.
at the bottom of the pyramid economy, people are struggling. So for us to even accelerate the journey towards Vision 2030, upper middle income status, we ought to have the central bank compelling banks to plow back. I would even start off at 30% of their profits being invested directly into the MSMEs, directly into the startups. How do we create viable venture capital schemes for this market? Look, I've personally immersed myself in universities in Zimbabwe, particularly trying to look at how they are scaling entrepreneurship. It's amazing. I mean, the young people, they've got ideas. They have innovation immersed in them. But you know what? As soon as they leave the campus, what become of them?
It's interesting you speak of coming up with lucrative venture capital companies in Zimbabwe. And we have the National Venture Capital Company of Zimbabwe, which has been set up under the Ministry of Finance to try and steer investment within startup companies, youthful ideas, and innovative ideas that have the capacity to turn around the economy of Zimbabwe. Now, you spoke of a 30% seed that various institutions could give back to the development of SMEs. And you spoke of the successes of countries that are in Asia with a more Eurocentric approach to funding SMEs. Where in Africa have we seen successful cases of venture capitalism, of investment and plowing back into the SME sector that we can replicate as Zimbabwe?
I mean, look, I would come at the very nearest South Africa, perhaps, with the B policy.
Yes.
And also to a very good extent, IDC South Africa has done absolutely very well in terms of funding SMEs, funding startups, and also mainstreaming blacks into the mainstream of the economy. They have their own share of challenges, but the policy architecture is there, and there's some very good examples within the economy there. In Zim, I think we ought to heighten, we have been talking about this for about more than 5 years now, to say, why can't the Reserve Bank compel banks to invest in SMEs, to invest in startups, 30% as a sanctioned component? The figure is for argument's sake, they could come up with a figure, but a decent one for that matter. Plow back to the SMEs. As an investment, mind you, that's not a grant. That's money that will go and drive SMEs. We have got SMEs in mining. We have SMEs in manufacturing. We have SMEs everywhere. In tourism, we have got our SMEs in there. Why can't we have demonstrated something with statistics? I love statistics. Something with statistics demonstrated that can be verified, very much verifiable. Let's have that. And let's replicate those over and over, year in, year out, year in, year out. I can rest assure you, we'll start changing stories. We'll start turning learning experiences in universities into economic conversations.
And when you say economic conversations, because at some point I thought as Zimbabwean citizens, we were having these conversations, probably maybe not in the right spaces and probably not speaking to the right people. But this is a platform on Pivot Point where we say we want these issues to be talked about, to be addressed, to be buttressed. And when we come back, we talk of plowing into the SMEs, plowing back into the SMEs. What would be the impact to me as an individual? Because at the end of the day, people at home want to understand, if banks are plowing back into SMEs, how am I benefiting? Inini Sarumbi, what am I getting out of this? Is there any change that I'm going to realize in my pocket at the end of the day? How does it cascade down to me as an individual?
Right. If we're talking about economic conversations, I'm actually talking about economic participation in a very real sense. I'm not saying, look, we're barren. We do have good examples of economic participation and right at an SME scale, we do have them. But we ought to accelerate those, because if we proliferate SMEs, thriving SMEs, imagine the employment generation that's in there. Imagine the economic activity when aggregated. Imagine the impact of that. Imagine when they get to a point of graduating from SME to sustained industry level. Imagine at a count in Zimbabwe, really, when we're talking industries, at one time, look, I had this conversation to say, look, come, let's talk statistics. How many industries do you have in Zimbabwe?
I think according to the last survey, we have a lot of industries, but
at what
very
scale?
few.
Not even a lot. I mean, if you're talking numbers that count won't go past 300, 400. It won't go
fully
past.
functional.
But we have 10 provinces in Zimbabwe. Divide that by 10. What is that? We're talking less than 30, 40 industries. So we ought to accelerate that. And we ought to scale the quality of industries that we're talking about. And how do we do this? We do this by guarding our raw materials jealously. Let's guard our raw material in terms of agriculture, in terms of mining. We ought to guard our raw materials. We ought to then connect primary production systems to entrepreneurship. We create a pipeline. You link primary production, you link that to entrepreneurs, you link that to markets. When we do that inside Zim, I can rest assure you, we're talking product proliferation, product development proliferation. And when we then have multifarious products going out of Zim, to various markets. We're talking about multiple sum of foreign currency earnings to Zimbabwe. So the current conversation now begins to gain weight. If our minerals, for example, would then be tied to Zimbabweans and minerals tied to a common market, a conversation of currency becomes a weighted conversation.
Now, I want to play the devil's advocate
Yeah.
and pose this question to you, Doctor. Is there a possibility for us as Zimbabweans, speaking of our minerals and our currency, where we can actually start detecting the pace by making sure that our gold, instead of being marked in US currency, is marked in the ZiG?
Yes. That will be a gem of a policy. That will be revolutionary.
How will it steer the economy? How will it steer the growth of the local currency and probably return to confidence to market for the local currency?
I can literally draw in air the architecture, the design for that.
Please do share.
You would have something resident within that RBZ, or a totally different market, a minerals market. That is totally indexed to local currency of every mineral. So meanwhile, you seal the borders and make sure that there is no single ounce of mineral that takes flight out of this country. Everything is traded via the counters at the minerals indexed market. So buyers come to this market with their currency. They're coming to buy our minerals indexed in our currency. And they ought to come through a foreign exchange counter where their currency is converted to our money in plastic form. So they come in deliberate quantities of what they want to buy. When they get there, they change their money to our money. They get our money in plastic form, they go and transact on the minerals counter. How much foreign currency do you think we can earn in a month and per day? And we are able to report. We have a big screen there that's recording in minerals that have been floated on the market, what has been bought on the market, and the balance of the minerals on the market carried forward to day two, on and on. The cumulative mass of foreign currency. What if we scale that to beneficiation as we discussed last week? Imagine when it's then reduced to commodity unit mineral, processed mineral, that's being traded at the counter in local currency, and transactions are happening right from exchange to commodity buying. Imagine the foreign currency earnings.
It's definitely something that I would want to see, and I'm hoping that we can continue this conversation. And each week when we sit down to discuss, slowly time trickles by, and within a short space of time. My producers will be telling me it's time up. And unfortunately for this particular conversation, we have to end here. But we will continue to unpack these issues for you right here on Pivot Point, and we're out.